Welcome everybody to today's QuickBooks Enterprise webinar with Fourlane. My name is Alisha. I am a senior partner here at Fourlane, and I will be going through the benefits of the audit trail today. Okay, so I want to look at this and look at why we would even want to use the audit trail. I know I've asked some of my clients, like, well, have you looked at the audit trail? And they're like, I don't know, what is that? So being able to understand why we want to use it, what it is good for, but just a very high level of some of the benefits, what we can do, right, with this information. And so identifying who entered the transaction, who modified it, right? These are some things we're going to go over. Being able to identify if a mistake was made, and then identifying that quickly will allow for us to coach and make that correction. We want to make sure that we are able to identify if there's any fraud, right? That is something that unfortunately companies have to look out for. We've got to make sure that we are protecting ourselves. Data security, making sure that we know how things are working on the back end of the system. I think that is super important. If you've ever gone through an audit, an internal audit, an external audit, it isn't fun. It's not our favorite. And so definitely allows us to have the ability to show and build that confidence. And then efficiencies, right? So being able to provide records very easily, very clearly, those are some things that we want to be able to use this audit trail for. Okay. I just want to remind everyone that if you have any questions, I'm going to try to answer those, but there's a questions bar that you can put any of your questions in. Rich, it looks like, but thanks for asking that. Okay, so opening up QuickBooks, we want to make sure that we are spending the most amount of time in QuickBooks being able to really look at this. And so not everyone uses this home page, but I'm coming to this home page in our sample file because I want to be able to show everyone from the individual transactions to the big report that we can run. And sometimes if you've ever used the audit trail, you will be able to know what I'm talking about, but it can generate a very big, massive report. And so I want to be able to show you some tips and tricks on that, okay? So if I go into a transaction, and I'm going to go to the customer center first, and I want to pick on a client or a job that I don't usually pick on, but this Middleton store, so this is just a regular sample file that everyone has access to if you have QuickBooks Enterprise. And so I am just going to pull up our estimate that we entered in, and I want to be able to show everyone how to get to the audit trail at the transaction level. So not a lot of people use this, and when I show them this, they get very excited. And sometimes I have heard, where has this been my entire life? Like right here in QuickBooks from day one, right? So this security is not something that you have to turn on. Just want to make sure that everybody understands that. We don't have to go to company preferences and turn on the audit trail. It is built in. It is a security that Intuit has already protected you with, and it is here, okay? So at my transaction level, I have this little pop-out window. If you don't have it, you can see right now, I have hidden the pop-out window just so it has that gray bar. And that gray bar, if you see that, go ahead and just click on that arrow. It will open up so that you have the customer tab, and then you have this transactions tab. This is a sample file, so it's always dated in the future, and it's always stuck at the same date. But if you go to this transactions tab and you look at the summary, it tells you when the transaction was created, what date, shows you by who, and it shows you when it was last modified, and the date and the user. So a lot of pretty cool things just on this transaction. Little magnifying glass here. Anyone doesn't know this, this magnifying glass allows for you to pull up the audit trail at the transaction level. So this is one of those saving graces, I say. I don't have to go run the audit trail, run a huge report and drill down into it to see this transaction's history. I can go click on the little magnifying glass and it will automatically populate the individual audit trail for that transaction. So I know that I can't see everybody, but raise of hands. It's okay if you raise your hand, but raise of hands. Who knew that? Who did not? Would love to see those. Okay, I'm gonna make this just a little bit bigger so we can look at it together and hopefully you can see it easily on my screen. So with this audit trail, what you can see is that there's 3 different times this transaction has been modified. This over here in our entered last modified is telling us the time, date and time, that every new save, right, took place for this transaction. These things in bold allow for us to see what was modified and what was changed very easily and very quickly. Okay, so they stand out for us, which is great. Now, I have a memo, but I don't have the item in here. So I have the ability to go to Customize Report, and I can identify the columns that I want to see. Okay, I'm just going to go in here and add the item description, and I'm going to add the quantity. Want to be able to see if any of these things changed on my transaction, and if so, what was it? So now we can easily see that I started with 2 items and I ended up with 3. We added an aqua pool cover. I started out at $39.99, $999.90. Increased that so it's dead even 40. And then we added the pool cover, so that's 41,000 and some change. So reflective of everything that took place within the system for this individual transaction. So being able to make modifications right? In the system, when we assign roles to users, they have the ability to open up a saved transaction and modify it if they have the appropriate roles. And so this allows us to be able to see who made the modification, when it was modified, and the effects in the system that was changed on that transaction. Okay. So what happens if someone makes a mistake? You should never have increased this to $40,000. Well, we have the ability to identify the user, to go to the user and correct their actions, their misunderstandings, so that we don't continue to keep having the same problem over and over and over. We also want to go back to our modify report window. This customize report button opens up and it gives you different options for when we do go run the audit trail for narrowing down potentially when we think that this transaction had been modified or when it was entered. So we can identify the report date range. We can also identify days entered, last modified. And then we have the ability to include deleted transactions if we need that. So I want to be able to go to an actual audit trail report and show you when these things would be useful. So I'm going to go ahead and go to reports. And you can follow along in your system as well. So if you go to reports, accountant, and audit trail. So the default opens up to today, which in my sample file stuck out in the future. And we have the ability to see all the individual transactions that have been entered for today. Couple of things that we could use this for. So let's just say if we were migrating data and we were trying to identify, as of today, how many transactions were we able to enter into the QuickBooks file. There's obviously an easier way than manual data entry. That's for a different webinar. But if that is something that we were wanting to do, we could come here and we could export and easily count these bolded lines, estimates, credit memos, invoices, build assemblies, all the things. We could get a count of that. We could say on a daily basis, we can enter X amount of transactions to get us caught up, right? Something that we could do. Because we have this sample file open, right? I want to go through and show some things that we can do to identify the information and the drill down capabilities. So if I wanted to just filter on the transaction type, might have to select the right thing here. So if I just wanted to do invoices that were created today, don't have any. So this is giving me that ability to be able to see what we've created, when we've created it. If I have to open this up, I can come here, can also click on all, and it'll open up all the transactions that have been created Now keep in mind, guys, this is a sample file. I didn't create an invoice today, but it is in the future, 2029. And so you gotta love some sample files. But you see all the individual invoices and all the times that they have been modified throughout this file. Okay, and you can export this to Excel just like you could any other report. You can email it. So this is that part where if we are needing to email to an auditor, maybe we are a manufacturing company and we want or need to be able to show the ins and outs of a particular item and a particular serial number. We have the ability to come, there's other reports. However, right, we can come here, we can add the item to the column. We can add the serial number, long as it's on in your file, right? These are all the columns. We can filter to narrow down and have the report generate an email, PDF, and Excel straight out of the system. Okay, so these are things that you don't have to manage outside of QuickBooks, can do it inside. I've got a question about, can we filter the audit trail by user? A great question. And yes, you absolutely can. So you have the ability, right, as a default, your entered last modified by and entered last modified and last modified by, these two columns, those are default. Let me show you where you can find this. So I just have admin in here, and you can see, and right now, because I only have one user, which is admin in a sample file, I don't have a second file open, but if I didn't have the sample file, I'd show you guys. But this is where you will see at a transaction, you'll see that this transaction's entered or modified by admin, and it'll show all the individual transactions by that user. Then, and the next user, which I don't have, you will see all of their transactions. And so we can filter by that. We have the ability. I just don't have any other users in this file. Okay, if you reach out, we can help you with that. Oh goodness, I got lots of questions. Audit information for a credit card transaction and not being able to see on different transaction types. And so that's a really, really good question. So if we don't have, yes, so if we don't have this, I'm just going to go to an invoice, this gray bar, right, on a transaction, then you want to go to the audit trail. I'm going to go through that one more time. So that's reports, accountant and taxes, and audit trail. And then customize this report and filter on your transaction types so that you will be able to narrow down the credit card transaction that you're looking for or those types, and then the date range. You can also narrow down by the account, right? And filter it that way. So you're not getting this big, massive report. Okay, hopefully Jennifer, I answered your question there, and if I didn't, please feel free to email us and I will see if I can help you with that, okay? All right, I know that I have so much that I want to go over with you guys, but I do want to make sure that I have the ability to also just share some other things with y'all that can show up on the audit trail along with the individual transactions. So if anyone has any additional questions from today's webinar, please reach out to us. You can also go to our Fourlane YouTube channel to be able to find some more webinars that we've done in the past, and this webinar will be there as well. So one thing that I want to talk about is staff turnover. So staff turnover can be something that when the new person comes in, right, especially in the accounting department, they have a lot of questions. They want to be able to see how did things work in the past. If you have deleted a user, right, it will still be able to show on the audit trail, right? But that user's name will show that it is a deleted user. So you'll be able to identify, right, that it was someone prior, no longer user available, but it will still show you that. And it's going to show you that in this last modified by column. Okay. So a very good way when you are changing out staff, creating new users, sometimes you don't have to delete a user. You can change the password and do view only and keep that information there, okay? The other thing that I want to make sure that we talk about, we talked about the filtering, running it at the transaction level, being able to identify and filter down for specifics. But what happens if our file size is really, really, really large? So you have the ability, because this audit trail is already set up in the QuickBooks file. So every user that is opening a transaction and making a modification. So think about every step in your workflow from start to finish, how many times you are modifying a transaction. I used to work at a company before I came here. They would open up a purchase order, and if that purchase order, the unit price changed by a penny, they would open up that purchase order, and if there was 20 different items on there, every single time that something changed, they would open it, they would make a change, they would make a note, and they would save it. And the reason why I'm saying this is because this can be one of the reasons why your file size, right, can get large, creates targets increases file size, and that is something that we can remove to maintain our file size. So we have the ability to remove the audit trail. It's almost like a snapshot in time. So we could remove the audit trail and start over at the beginning of a year, midway through the year. One of the things that we talk to our clients about is proactive maintenance. So instead of being reactive, be proactive. QuickBooks file size, it cannot be an endless file size. If you have a 4 gig file, you're over the database limitations. So you have the ability to remove the audit trail to reduce your file size, and that can help us stay within the database limitations for QuickBooks. So all of these things that you see, where this started in 2013, this transaction. And every year, because it's a sample file, it gets moved and changed, and brought out. So all of those things would go away. I would have the old file to revert back to and look at, but I would start my audit trail after I removed it new and build it back up. So if that is anything that you guys are faced with having a large file size, not being able to really remove or wanting to condense the details, we could talk to you about potentially removing the audit trail to reduce your file size. All right, I was telling myself I was not going to go over today. And again, if anyone has any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to us. We appreciate you joining. Thank you so much for your time today. Meet us back here next week for another webinar. Thank you.